my thing. I want to get into it, man, you know. Moving, doing it, you know. Can I count it off? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Marq'd Men podcast, the men's lifestyle podcast featuring two Marquette graduates, John Scott Lewinski, an adventure journalist, author, photographer, and myself, Jim McIlvaine, class of 1994. And we talk about guy stuff, cars, trucks, guns, travel, golf. John's a big golfer. Lots of different subjects. Today's subject will be of great interest to folks who have come out to Las Vegas probably. But before we get to that, I want to mention our sponsors: Lingenfelter Performance Engineering, BF Goodrich Tires, Willwood Disc Brakes, Samson Microphones, Blue Microphones, and of course Optima Batteries. Today we're going to talk with Mike Meacher, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Front Sight Firearms Institute in Pahrump, Nevada. And Mike, welcome to the podcast. I apologize for the glitch that happened earlier. I can hear it recording just fine now, and unfortunately, we weren't an hour into the interview, so we're going to start from scratch here.
Not a problem, Jim. Thanks, and I appreciate your opportunity to talk to your audience.
Tell us, we're in Pahrump, Nevada, but where is Pahrump, Nevada?
Pahrump is a town of about 35,000 people. It's about 50 miles north of Nevada, of Las Vegas, and it's out in the middle of the desert, a little bit west of Mount Charleston, which you can see as you fly in, if you've flown into Las Vegas.
Okay, and Front Sight is a firearms training academy. I'm a member there of some type. I've been for several years. I've made 4 trips out. I've done the 4-day defensive handgun class twice. I've done the 4-day practical rifle class. I've done the concealed carry class and the 4-day tactical shotgun class. Can you tell folks why Pahrump, Nevada, or where you're at exactly, and what was it about that location that appealed to you, and maybe the origins of Front Sight in general?
Certainly, be happy to. We originally started Front Sight in 1996, and we started in Bakersfield, California, north of Los Angeles, and we started our facility by renting some existing ranges, and at that point we decided we wanted to expand it, and in the process of expanding, we found that California was certainly not going to be a sufficiently gun-friendly state to build what we wanted to build with Front Sight. So we started looking for states that had a variety of criteria that are gun-friendly laws, reasonable land costs, water and utilities availability, access to paved roads, the basic things that you'd look for as you were going to develop something. And our search led us to 2 choices. They were either Nevada or Florida. And when we selected Nevada, which was because we had a customer base of 6,000 or 7,000 members at that time in Front Sight, we selected Nevada for proximity to California and our existing customer base. We then decided we'd go looking for something that met our criteria within an hour drive time of McCarran Airport, which is where you fly in Las Vegas. And it's surprising probably to your audience, because if you've ever flown into Las Vegas and look outside, it looks like there's developable land any direction for as far as you can see. That's not really the case. Something on the order of 85% of all that land is owned either by the federal government or by Indian nations. So when we hired a real estate search firm to look for land that met our criteria with available water, proximity to roads, at least 500 acres, variety of other things, there were only 3 choices. And we purchased one of those properties, which is a 550-acre property, and then subsequent to that, we bought all the water rights necessary to fully develop Front Sight. And as I said, we started in 96. We started with 10 students at rented facilities in Las Vegas. And I was in the second class when Frontsite opened, and that class was being taught by the founder and director of Frontsite, Dr. Ignatius Piazza, and he and I became friends and have stayed friends for the last 20-some years. And so that growth curve started with rented facilities and 10 students, and now, at the time we're recording this, which is 2018, Frontsite has about 220,000 members.
Wow.
In all 50 states, 10 or 12 foreign countries. We're the largest firearms training facility in the United States by a factor of 10 or 12. We see more people in a busy week in the spring or fall than many facilities do their entire year. Doesn't mean we're cooler by that 10 or 12 times, but we've refined our curriculum and refined our courses, as you've experienced, to give people great value. It's a skill set that we train, and our general mantra, our mission statement, is to train people to a level that exceeds military and law enforcement standards without a boot camp mentality or a drill instructor attitude. And that's been exhibited by who our student mix is. If you go to most shooting facilities, you'll find very few women. And at Frontsite, our female attendance is routinely 22 to 25%. So we get lots of husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends and moms and dads and grandkids and families. In fact, you and the rest of our members we call First Family. And so we now are at 220-ish thousand members and growing by 12, 15, some years even 20%.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of our listeners are back in the Midwest and may not have spent much time out here. To describe this terrain in this area, it's basically the real-life version of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. You mentioned water rights. I see the election signs because we're in close to November and the elections where everybody's going to fight for your water. Tell me the water situation out there, because it doesn't look like there's been any natural water out there for a millennia or more.
Well, you don't see it on the surface because in the summer it gets to 110, sometimes more than that, degrees. But there are aquifers underground that hold the water that drains off of Mount Charleston, which is immediately east of our facility and east of Pahrump. That gets a lot of snow on it every year. When the snow melts, it turns into water. Water's got to go someplace. It flows down the mountain and eventually percolates down into the aquifers. So you don't see very many lakes out here. And if you had a lake, you'd be filling it up all the time because it would be evaporating. So the underground aquifers are what we tap into to pull water up with pumps and wells. And you cannot develop anything, residence, business, without water access. So water rights are very important in developing in southern Nevada.
And when I look at the Frontsite facility, it seems like it's pretty isolated in every direction. So if any bullets or anything were to go off in the distance, they'd probably just land out in the middle of nowhere. But my question is, I'm more familiar with racetracks and their development issues. How receptive was Nye County to the establishment of Frontsite out here, and have they generally welcomed the academy in and the students that come in?
Frontsite has been welcomed very nicely by all of the people in Pahrump and Nye County. And the reason is, as some of your business-minded listeners may understand, the reason is money. Frontsite brings in about 40,000 students a year. They purchase about 100,000 room nights a year, and they fill up all the local restaurants and buy food at the local markets and buy the local gasoline. And we had an economic impact study done to pinpoint for the bureaucrats in Nye County, the county commissioners and others, just how much that economic impact is. And it's estimated currently to be between $35 and $40 million a year.
Wow.
And for a town of 35,000 people, that's the reason they're welcoming us.
And so every time I've come out there, you have a classroom. What's the capacity on that classroom?
Current classroom holds 425 people.
and it seems like every time I come out, it's just about packed with people. And the ranges all have, typically at least it seems like 3 staff members on each range.
Yeah, our standard staffing is 1 staff member for every 4 to 5 people on the firing line. And as a result, we have people looking at you all the time, and our safety record reflects that. We have 50 total ranges, and they range from 30-yard handgun ranges out to 1,000-yard precision rifle. Each of those ranges has a capacity of at least 40 people. So if you do the math on that, we have the ability to train 2,000 people at a time. So we've built a larger recreational facility than our current member base can utilize. But we have days when we've had 11 or even 1,200 people on the property, and that would compare with most any other shooting facility that you've ever been. If they have more than 100 or 150 people, it would be a once-in-a-year event. Routinely in the spring or fall, we'll have more than 1,000 people a week coming to Front Sight.
Yeah. And how many people are employed either part or full-time at Front Sight?
Our current payroll is about 180 people.
Okay. And that's pretty good size for the Pahrump, Nye County area?
That's a big business for this area. You know, we're certainly in the top 10 or 12 employers in Nye County, which is the jurisdiction where we're located. Another reason why they're happy to have us.
Yeah. So can you tell me about the typical Front Sight student or Front Sight member and who that person might be? Because I think people probably, especially those who aren't familiar with firearms, may have a misperception about who folks are that come out here and what they might be.
You know, that's a pretty common question, Jim. The thing that I want to emphasize to your listeners is we are not the Rambo Academy. We are not teaching people how to use deadly force. Deadly force may result in what they're learning, but they also are taking a variety of lectures, which you've experienced, which explain in great detail the real world of the risks and liabilities that are involved in the legal, the moral, the ethical uses of deadly force. So to your question of who our students are, when you've got 220-ish thousand people, they run the gamut from high school kids to Forbes 400 guys that fly out here in their Gulfstream jets, from housewives to accountants and lawyers and ditch diggers and people who come to Front Sight as their version of a vacation. They come as though they're going to Disneyland or Disney World, and they come a couple of times a year. Some of them come once a month. A lot of female participation, a lot of families, a lot of groups have gotten together and become friends at Front Sight, and they communicate with each other and come back and put their same group of people together for the class again next year. So it's a recurring event for them.
And so people understand, however you end up with your membership. I actually purchased a membership for my brother-in-law. When you buy that membership at the level that I'm at, I can go to as many classes as I want, as often as I want, and there's basically no additional cost to that. Is that correct?
It is. The first family memberships are lifetime. There are different levels of membership, as you point out. I think there's about 30 different levels. But at the basic level, they include handgun, shotgun, rifle classes, 2 days and 4 days. The limit is non-existent. You can take that as many times as you want. If you take the 4-day classes, we provide a skills test at the end. And the skills test is meant to give you a decent index on your current skill set in using that particular weapon, handgun, shotgun, rifle. And we set a minimum of about 90% on that skills test before we let you go on to take more advanced classes. So the concept is a little bit like college. We don't call it Handgun 101, but conceptually for your listeners, if it were Handgun 101, you need to get 90% or more on the exit test before you can take Handgun 201. And we have less than 10% of our students who achieve that level. So it's a stringent test. It's a good test
I
of
didn't
skills.
achieve it last week. I was running a 357, and that's a little bit harder for me to shoot than a Glock, but I'm getting used to it.
Well, and the answer on the gun question is which gun and for me and what should I use and so forth is really covered by some of the hats and T-shirts we have in our pro shop, which say any gun will do if you will do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the real concept. So if you have 5 different types of handguns at home, they will have slightly different manual of arms and operations. And if you want to become skilled at all of them, you'll be taking multiple handgun classes at Front Sight. And as you have just described, it's easier with some than others. And they relate to size of hand, ability to absorb recoil, sight radius, a variety of technical issues. But the concept is you need to train in order for you to be competent in the mechanical operation of the weapon system. But the more important issue, when someone asks me what business that you're in, we train people to levels that exceed law enforcement or military standards. We don't have this military or boot camp mentality at all, and it's very family friendly. But the real business that we're in, Jim, is teaching people how to think with regard to a weapon. This is not target shooting where you shoot concentric circles under unlimited time situations in perfect light, no weather issues. You know, the real world of civilian involved shooting is that majority of them are going to be at low light or night. They're going to be from 20 feet or less, and the whole situation is going to be over in 5 seconds. So if you think you're properly training for the eventuality of something like that happening when a bad guy breaks into your home, and the way you're training for that is at noon under no time constraints, and you're shooting concentric circles, you know, the number of concentric circles that have ever broken into a home is pretty limited. So our targets are human silhouette targets. We describe shot placement and discuss it as you've experienced. And it's a more challenging environment because you're shooting at specific targets. And as you move up in the skill set, under our instruction of our range masters, you'll move from human silhouette diagram targets to photographic targets. And if you still progress to tactics and advanced tactics, you'll learn shooting on the move, you'll learn shooting on force with simunitions and soon to be laser products that we can discuss later if you're interested, that are simulators that give you as the student the very best opportunity to understand the stress and the complexity of a firearm event to defend your life or the life of your loved one. It's not nearly as simple as you see in the movies. And what I usually tell people is if Bruce Willis and Arnold Schwarzenegger have been your firearms training instructors, you need to come to Front Sight.
So, in the interest of full disclosure, I think the first class I took at Front Sight was tactical shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I learned my lesson with golf. My dad got me involved in golf when I was young and eventually got some lessons for me, but at that point I had so many bad habits, I never corrected them. I'm maybe one of the worst golfers you'll ever meet who's played as many rounds as I have. And so when I came out for tactical shotgun, I had purchased a shotgun, but never shot it till I got out here. And then when I came out for the handgun class, I didn't even own a handgun. I rented a Glock, and you can rent guns and ammunition here. You can't rent the ammunition. You have to buy that, but you can rent the guns and all the equipment you need, and basically just come out here, so you don't have to carry a gun through an airport or anything like that. Is that correct?
That's true. Yeah, it's very common for people who don't have their own weapons or gear to come to us and reserve the guns, the gear, purchase the ammo. And the advantage to doing it with us is if your wife came out and she doesn't have a handgun, she might know what not know what she likes, what would fit her hand, what fits her aesthetic sense, what volume of what size caliber she could handle. So we can rent that to students, and in the middle of the class they can change. If they decide that the frame size is too large or too small, they can make an adjustment. So yeah, we do provide all that because there's an awful lot of new students, new to shooting, that come to Front Sight. In fact, it's very common for us to have, say, a husband who's been shooting all his life, who has acquired some of those bad habits you were discussing in golf. And in that process, he decides that it would be a good idea for his wife to have some understanding in case he's not in the home and she has a problem while he's traveling or somewhere outside. And so he will bring his wife along, and he purchases a membership for her, and they both take the 4-day handgun class. Well, he's already shot for some number of years, acquired bad habits, and he has the I already know it mentality. And we've discovered over the years that women are better students. They listen better. They follow instructions better. And as a result, it's pretty common at the end of 4 days that wife, who has never fired a weapon before, will shoot as well or better than her husband.
Well, there's a woman, Michelle, who was in my handgun class, and she got distinguished graduate. I don't think she shot outside the lines all week long. She was amazing and had very good control. And I actually, when I came out for my first handgun class, I started with a 1911 because I didn't know one from another.
Right.
And I asked your staff, I've got big hands, and they recommended the 1911. And then when I got on the range, it seemed like I pulled it, and it was always pulling in the same direction. And they said if I switched to a Glock, it might be a thicker grip for me, and it ended up being a more accurate weapon for me. But it was nice to have that option.
Well, it's nice to have that option before you spend the money to have purchased the 1911 and find out that for whatever reason it's not an optimum choice for you. And you're a big guy and you have leverage that a shorter, smaller person might not. But the mechanics of shot placement, whether you're 7'1" or 5'1", are really the same. And our staff can diagnose for you on the fly, based on what they see on your target and what they observe in your presentation and shooting skills, things that you should be doing to improve. And it's that constant repetition that gives people a confidence level, and then it's backed up by lectures so people truly understand if something goes wrong in the middle of the night, the order of events generally is run, hide, fight.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a plan, like anything else in life, and you're going to figure it out on the fly, it's probably not going to be a well-executed plan.
So when I came out here, I was surprised. I saw the staff members all in the same uniforms. It looked like a kind of a military type of environment, but once I got on the range, the staff were not what I was expecting. They were friendly, they were welcoming. It wasn't strict, stay in line, do this, do that. I mean, when it came to safety, they were top of the line priority in terms of making sure everybody was behaving in a safe manner. But it was a comfortable environment. It wasn't at all intimidating like I was expecting it to be. And as you mentioned, there were a lot of people from a wide variety of backgrounds. What's the lowest age of people who can participate in the training?
It depends on whether they're accompanied by their parent or not. And there are some judgment calls based on, some 12 or 14-year-olds are bigger and stronger and more competent than others. So there's some judgment call, but the simple answer is unaccompanied, 18, accompanied down to a lower number that typically is going to be around 12, but mom or dad or their guardian has to be with them in the class and has to be paired with them in the class so we don't have any supervising issues.
And I've seen a lot of fathers and sons and some fathers and daughters and mothers and sons and mothers and daughters. So
it's a great bonding exercise. The families can do lots of things together and go hiking and race cars and play golf and shoot guns. I mean, this is just an activity that families can do for a common experience. This has the additional value, perhaps over golf, as in your explanation, that if you are really good at understanding what we're teaching you and you practice, this particular activity could save your life or the life of someone in your family if something terrible were to happen.
And I really looked at this because I come from an environment where my dad was not a hunter. We never had guns in the house. I felt like it was an important life skill for me to have, because I'd look at a semi-automatic weapon and it was intimidating. I didn't understand how it worked generally, from what you watch on TV or in the movies. I could probably figure it out, but I felt like at some point in my life I might find myself in a situation where I'd find one of these guns and have to safely unload it, or I'd be around somebody else, a friend or a family member who would have one of these guns, and I'd want to at least have an understanding of, are they behaving safely with this weapon? Are they doing something that I should be aware of, that I should prevent them from doing to keep me or somebody else from accidentally getting injured? I mean, I look at it along the lines of learning to swim and learning to drive a car. You may be a tree-hugging, granola-eating rock licker and never want to drive a car your whole life, but if somebody needs medical attention and you need to figure out how to drive a stick shift car at that moment, that's a terrible time to do it. So why not learn how to drive a stick shift? Or you may hate the water and never go swimming, but you don't want to have to try to figure out how to swim if you've accidentally fallen in. And it's the same thing with the firearms. For me, that was my motivation for coming out here, is I just want the knowledge. And I think your staff did a great job of imparting that, not just on me, but on everybody that came through.
Well, it might be interesting to your listeners to appreciate how we acquire staff. As I said, we have about 180 employees. The range staff is maybe 110 of those, and there's various levels of range personnel, from entry-level range safety officers up to our range masters, who are the most competent. And you said before that they had uniforms on, and the word uniform is the operative concern there. It's not for proximity to the military, it's so that you as a student would be able to distinguish who a staff member is from the rest of the students.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that dress up like they're in the military that are actually students.
Well, they do. There are the SWAT cop Rambo wannabe who will wear tactical gear, and that's fine, but they won't be wearing gear that has nameplates and front sight nameplates and front sight patches and so forth. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to me, the preconceptions that people have about where you get staff members for this type of activity. The obvious choice would be retired military and law enforcement. We have a number of those. The not so obvious choice would be from our student ranks. And we have a number of students who have taken every class we've offered, who've excelled at that, who've demonstrated an interest and a capacity, but firearms skills, the ability to put shots downrange, on target, on demand, is not the first thing we select for. The first thing we're looking for is people skills. The second thing we're looking for is verbal skills. And we can teach you the firearms component, but we can't teach you to be nice. It's more difficult to teach you to be compassionate. So we have every month an open opportunity for students and others to apply for a teaching position at Front Sight at an entry level. And it's a 4-day class. It costs them nothing, but they have the ability to make a decision that they do or don't want to spend 4 days. They bring their own weapons and their own ammo and pay their own airfares, but we charge them nothing for the class. But we guarantee them they're only going to be there for the first half of the first day. And we start making cuts based on their inability to follow orders, their inability to communicate, all the basic things that I just discussed. And at the end of that 4 days, we'll usually offer somewhere between 8 and 10% of those attending a job. And they've got to be pretty committed, because they're not going to make a lot of money when they first start with us. But most people who are in the firearms training business in the United States have to have other jobs because they don't make enough money working at Billy Bob's gun range and pizza parlor to generate full-time income. Our range masters, who've spent with us on average 1,200 hours of training before they get to range master, can work for us full-time and make a full-time living, and we have a number of them that do. But to the origin of it, we have students fill some of our ranks, and we have quite a number of female staff members, and we even have multi-generation female staff members. We have a mom who's one of our range masters who came to us on an open invitation to try out, and she worked her way up, and she's now one of our most accomplished range masters, and she was a housewife. And her daughter now works for us as a beginning level instructor, and they're both great.
That's awesome. I think in every class I've been, except this most recent one, I've either had law enforcement officers or active military members, and maybe I had active military and just didn't know it. Why are there so many people who would seem like they would have the training they'd need in either law enforcement or military coming out the front side?
Probably 85 to 90% of our students are civilians. The other 15-ish% come from military and law enforcement. And the why is it depends on where they're from. If they, in law enforcement, are a member of a large department like LAPD or Las Vegas Metro or some New York Police Department, some large outfit, they have excellent training facilities. They probably have a pretty good training program. If they come from a small department in a rural area, they may not have much of a training budget, and they may not have any training facilities. So it's very common for us to see law enforcement from smaller departments. They'll sometimes send their range masters so that they can learn our curriculum in a manner to help support the 10 or 20 or 30 officers back home. And many times they'll send the whole department. We've got small departments in California out to Mecklenburg, Virginia, who've sent officers who first group had fun, learned a lot, sent the rest of their buddies. So the issue becomes, do they have the facilities? Do they have the training regimen? It would probably surprise some of your listeners to understand how few training hours the average police department provides for their officers. And it would also probably surprise you to understand how few times a police officer in his or her career ever has to unholster their weapon. You see it on TV, and you assume that police officers are brandishing their weapons all the time. I met sheriffs of large police departments who worked for 30 years and never removed the weapon from holsters except for qualifying for ongoing training.
So do you offer private training if like a police department wants to come out or individuals want to come out?
We do. We do have some private training for both civilians and police. Sometimes the police department will say, we'd like to use your facilities to do some specific training, and here are the things we want to work on. Can you come up with a program for us and set aside facilities? That's not real common, but we do it periodically. And sometimes we have higher level memberships that offer private training. We've had some people express, we're a customer driven business, so when our customers say, we'd like this, and if they say that in sufficient number, we'll try to provide it. One of those things was, I've enjoyed taking classes with 30 or 40 other people, but what I'd like to do is have just my wife and myself and my son take a class, just the three of us. And so they've upgraded their membership to a higher level that allows for some amount of that training. And we do have those classes now routinely for small groups. And some employers and small businesses have purchased memberships for their 10 or 12 employees, and they'll come out and take a class with just that group. There have been real estate ladies who've come out. Surprise your listeners also probably to understand that real estate ladies have a higher degree of risk than you might think. Doing a real estate open house, sitting in a vacant home all by themselves.
Taking complete strangers out into the middle of nowhere to look at a house that everybody knows is empty.
It has potential problem written all over it, and you don't have to look very far in the internet to find stories of those encounters that have gone wrong. So we've had a lot of real estate ladies who've tried to understand better what they can do to protect themselves and to understand what the threshold of the rules are for civilian defense. It's a very different set of rules than the military. It's a very different set of rules than the police department. I mean, the real simple answer is, when can you as a civilian or me as a civilian use deadly force? And the answer in real simple terms is only if you believe that you're in fear for your life or the life of someone else that's immediately adjacent to you. When the bad guy's running out of your house with all of the most important stuff in your house and his hands are occupied, you cannot shoot him. I guess you can, but if you do, you're going to jail. You must understand that everything that's on the line, when you press that trigger, even under the most righteous of circumstances, you're probably going to get sued and you may get arrested. And what do you do or say when that condition occurs? You probably didn't learn that in college.
Yeah.
So Front Sight is all about trying to give you the basics of good decision making and then the basics of good weapon handling. And the marketplace has responded because we're growing really rapidly. And your listeners might understand that we're not just a shooting facility. We're building a resort. We're currently grading for the resort side. We'll put in some condominiums. There'll be an RV park out there, some commercial spaces that will allow students to ship gear and guns to Front Sight and back home. We have a lot of people who come out and take a class at Front Sight but choose to then put a week or a weekend in Las Vegas on one end or the other of that trip. And so they may not want their 2 suitcases full of range gear to be carted around in the hotel, so they just could ship it home. It's going to be a resort that, not 5-star, not super fancy, but good clean rooms, good clean food, good operations where people can come out and stay at Front Sight and make it more like a Disneyland for shooters.
So with those developments in the pipeline, is there concern from the Pahrump community that we're not going to get the economic impact that we once had because everybody's going to stay at Front Sight and eat there and never leave there?
Like most governments, they get you when you're going to the left and they get you when you're going to the right. So they will get you on, in this case, room taxes. They'll get you on increased property taxes. They'll get you on sales tax. So it will change who we pay and how we pay it, but they'll still be getting great compensation.
Okay. When you talk about the different programs, my brother-in-law, whom I purchased my membership from, brought his younger sons out here as well, and they didn't shoot while they were out here, but they had other activities for younger kids. Is that correct?
We do. We have a variety of classes. We have rope, rappel, and climb classes. We have children's safety classes. Your listeners can go on to frontsight.com, spelled like the front sight of a weapon, frontsight.com, and look up class schedule, and then there's class descriptions there. So it's a class in understanding the footprints and the plants and the environment of the desert. Kids go out supervised into the desert. They like the hiking. They like to see, what does a snake print look like in the sand? Well, if you're from an area where it's all paved over, you've probably never seen a snake print, and some of them are very interesting. We've got some critters out here that you don't see all the time. Lots of little desert squirrels, little bitty things, but they're super quick. So the kids do have classes, and parents love it. They send their kids doing rope and rappel. They send them. We have an age-appropriate classes in archery and even shooting. So you may be familiar with a little bitty rifle called a chipmunk. It's a .22 caliber. It's cut down, so it's got a short stock and a short barrel, and it's under direct supervision. The kids shoot, and they shoot at balloons, so it's age appropriate, and they learn the basics of understanding that these are weapons. They're not toys, and it's not intimidating, but it should be respected, and they shouldn't deal with it alone. They need to get an adult. So it's a good learning curve, and you can bring children. I think we have classes for kids as young as 8.
Okay. So one of the camps that I've been involved with for a long time, grew up there, volunteered there, they have a pellet gun range, and they've gotten grants from various organizations for that. Do you guys get any, outside of training government, police officers or military, do you get any government funding or grants or anything like that for training certain people or anything like that, or are you privately funded?
Front Sight's a private business owned by one individual, Dr. Ignatius Piazza. We have no government support. We have no government involvement. We don't do any grant money. It's a very complicated and complex process, and most of them aren't geared to firearms training. If they're military type grants, they want them done on military facilities. So
nothing from like the NRA or anybody like that?
That's correct.
Young shooter programs? Or
we currently have none of that.
Okay. I read something about special training that you offered for pilots and school teachers.
When there have been various crises, Frontside has been the first to offer training to help mitigate the recurrence of those kinds of problems. So we offered training in the teacher example that any school district that provided us a letter from their superintendent of schools, that we would train those teachers for free so that those teachers could be better responders to help protect the students in their charge.
And so that offer is still open to school districts, or is that
absolutely open?
Okay. And so if people if a school district want to learn more about that, they can just go to the website and contact Frontsight and say, I'm a superintendent, I'd like to train some of my teachers.
Certainly.
Okay.
Give us a call, and we're more than happy to talk with them and see how we can help.
What's one of your favorite success stories of Frontsight or the students that have come through?
to improve their probability and decision making when and if they ever had a problem, either at home or in their job. So that would be one example that came to mind. And the other was a former veteran. He was a Vietnam vet. And early on, Front Sight promoted a free submachine gun class to lure people to come listen to our pitch about what we were doing and how great it was going to be. And this gentleman attended a free submachine gun class. And he was in a wheelchair. And he was a multiple amputee. And the first obvious course of action would have been to say, no, we can't train you, you're at a risk. How can you possibly shoot a machine gun when you only have half of one arm and neither lower leg? And we didn't. We, at that time, did not have ranges set up for handicapped people. Your listeners might find it interesting to know that we now have 4 ranges that are set up for handicapped students who are in wheelchairs or use walkers or canes, so that they never have to get off onto gravel, which is a little harder to motivate, to move on. So we lifted, our staff lifted this gentleman up to the firing line and placed him there and gave him, remember he only has one arm, and we figured out how to place the firearm on his wheelchair so that it was well supported, and put the remainder of his other arm over the top of it in a position where it would not impact the rounds coming out. And we let him shoot a machine gun. And because he was supported in that position, when he fired a full magazine, which was 30 rounds of 9mm into that target from, I think it was 10 yards, it was almost like the turret of a tank, because it was well supported, and he had the mass of his body plus the wheelchair plus our staff were standing behind him. The group that he got was very small, and it was the best group, closest group of rounds together of anybody of that 30 people.
Huh.
And we routinely looked at the targets and then would award an attaboy or an attagirl to whoever had the best group, the smallest group. And we made a big point of showing this Vietnam vet that he was the best in that group. And he was not only appreciative, but he cried. And he told me later on that that's the first time he'd felt appreciated in the many years that had been since he'd come back from Vietnam and lost many of his limbs.
What would you say, maybe not just the biggest challenge that Front Sight faces, but the firearms training industry faces today?
Well, the simplification of that answer is the demonization of firearms. I mean, if you take a look at the term assault rifle, just the use of the word assault is a pejorative term, and it's meant to emotionalize something. If we're sitting here looking at a desk that has some water bottles on it, and I suspect if that water were frozen, I could try to beat you to death with the frozen water. So my question would be, does that make that an assault water bottle? Or if I kill you with a pen, is the pen an assault pen? Well, in the case of the phrasing, assault requires human interaction. The Glock handgun or the AR-15 or the Mossberg shotgun laying on the desk or the bed or in your home someplace is incapable of assaulting anyone. It requires you or me to act on it, to make a decision. I mean, it's an inanimate piece of metal and plastic. It is not going to jump up off the bed and assault someone. So the only reason for the use of those terms is to politicize. And it's unfortunate, but I think that represents an attempt to dissuade people who are uninformed about learning about this particular group of tools. We're never going to tell people that they should all have guns in their house and learn how to shoot. It's not for everybody. But there's arguably over 100 million gun owners in the United States. And we see thousands of them every year. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, many of them are either uninformed or they've acquired bad habits, as you were discussing in the golf analogy earlier. They've acquired these habits over years of not being trained. You know, they picked up a gun and, you know, a buddy of theirs said, you do this, and you went out and shoot a couple of tin cans, and now you're ready. Well, no, you're not. Now you're dangerous. And so I think the biggest threat in general to the firearms world is lack of information and politicizing of the gun issue.
What would be something that somebody would come out here and have a misconception about what the experience is going to be like as a first-time student? What do you think their expectation will be versus their reality if they don't really know anybody who's gone to front sight before? Maybe they're listening to this podcast. I'd like to learn how to safely handle a firearm. I'm going to go out there, but this is what they're expecting versus this is what they're going to get.
The expectation typically is for a more militaristic, highly regimented, you know, if you miss the shot, we make you do 20 push-ups and run around with a rifle over your head. That's not us at all. The real value to front sight is the consistency of the training. If you've come out and had a good time and moved your skill set up and learned a lot, and you tell your friend and he comes out a year from now and takes a class, what he will experience is what you experienced. The problem that most smaller facilities have is they may have a one or two competent instructors, and you take a class from one who was a former police officer and pretty knowledgeable. But he needs a few days off once in a while, so he hires some lesser experienced staff person with very little training, and that person may provide a different experience. So the consistency of our product is unique in the firearms world. It's, in fact, I've been walking down ranges that are all group, let's say, handgun, and they're providing the lecture components and the shooting components within 20 or 30 seconds of each other, range to range to range. And our content is vetted by a curriculum committee, and we update it routinely. So if there's something that we can do better or more efficiently, we do it. We listen to our students and ask them for their input. Some of their requests are silly. Some of them don't understand. But if they make good suggestions, and they do routinely, we'll incorporate them into future training curriculum.
I shot with a gentleman in my most recent class, longtime handgun owner, had been shooting for many years. He made a comment that was interesting to me because I took one handgun class back at home at a range, but outside of that I didn't have any formal training experience. The comment he made was, in all his years of taking lessons and classes from various people, concealed carry or whatever, he'd never been to a school like Front Sight where they actually drew from the holster when they were doing their firing drills and exercises.
The average listener to your podcast is going to have an indoor range somewhere close to them. By indoor, I mean it's a concrete tilt-up commercial building that has a small ammo and pro shop facility in the front, and then you shoot at a group of targets that are inside a concrete box, and they go up and back on a track system, and those targets probably are no further than 20 yards from you. You're not allowed to present from a holster by their rules. You're separated from the adjacent person only by a panel on either side, and you put your weapon on a desktop environment, and you are able only to shoot from picking it up in that position to the target that's downrange, 5, 10, 15 yards. That's fine. It's better than nothing. But it's not a realistic representation of the situation that you may find yourself in when you need to make a decision about using deadly force. And the weapon will not be on a desktop. It won't be a static target out there at 10 yards in a well-lit environment indoors with a person shooting adjacent to you on either side. So the reality-based approach that Frontsight takes is one that causes students to realize, gosh, I didn't know that. Just like the gentleman that you're talking to. Gee, I'd never learned how to do that. Well, if you've taken our 4-day class, as an example, you learned where to put your support side hand so that it's back at your midsection. Well, it's not just happenstance that we have that. If it's out here and you're presenting the weapon and your muzzle crosses in front of your hand and you're in a hurry to try to get the shot as quickly as possible, and you press the trigger and you've got an extra hole in your hand that you didn't have before, which is not something you want to experience. So as a result, people learn the basics of presentation, and then they move up the learning curve from human silhouette targets to photographic targets, and then they move up to moving and shooting on the run. If you'd ever have to use a weapon in an outdoor environment, if you shoot at somebody or they're shooting at you, do you really think everybody's going to be standing still?
No.
Okay. So understanding your target, understanding the justification for shooting your target, can you justify pressing that trigger? Who is that target? Have you identified it? Is it a threat? Is it a supportable threat? If it is, what's behind the threat? Is there a wall that is just drywall that separates you from, another business next door, and those rounds penetrate, if you miss, through that wall and injure or kill someone behind you? You own that. That's your responsibility. Further, it's a very difficult thing to simulate force-on-force training without getting people hurt. So we have now UTM, a simunitions product, which is, think of it as high-tech paintball. So you can shoot at other people in a controlled environment. You'd have a face mask or goggles and a chest protector on, but you can still get hurt with UTM. It's going about 350 feet per second, and
what's a typical bullet, like a 9mm, go for comparison?
900 to 1100 feet per second. You get hit by UTM, you'll probably come up with a few choice words, especially if it hits you like I've had it hit me on the back of a thumb, and it gets all black and blue, and you may lose the nail, and or if you're wearing a face protector and the person is turning to the side and the round goes either at their ear or between the face protector and their face, there's some risk. Mm-hmm. And most of the time we've discovered, guess what? People don't like to be shot. So we are under contract with a company out of Canada, and we will be putting in a laser-based simulator in our resort development that works kind of like this. Think of this one as very high-tech laser tag. So when you've acquired sufficient skill level, we'd now zip you into a vest. The vest has like a 3-piece suit vest. It has infrared sensors on the front, the sides, and the back. You'd be wearing goggles, or you'd have a hat that have infrared sensors under the hat brim or in the goggles. Those two items are linked together to a belt that you wear around your waist, which is a stun belt. The stun belt can be set on vibrate or actual electrical stunning up to sufficiently high level to incapacitate you, like a stun gun.
Mm-hmm.
We will put you in environments that are photorealistic environments that are like a convenience store or a single-story home or a motel room or a bank environment. The top 8 or 10 things where civilians are likely to have to make a decision over shooting or not shooting. But not like the simulators we have now. These will be built by Hollywood set designers so that they look like a real convenience store and they look like a bank lobby. And we will have role players in there. They'll have vests on also. You won't know whether they're good guys or bad guys, just like the real world. So you will go into this special area, and this will be a fenced off area at front site of about 10 acres, where you'll be able to shoot or not shoot and make a decision based on the real life situation of something happening that you didn't expect and how you're going to react. And people are going to be making noise and people are going to be moving. And we'll be able to debrief you, meaning we have cameras in this environment that will have infrared filters on them, and we'll be able to play back the video and show you the little white blips of light against a time clock. And that will show you when the little lady in the 7-Eleven with the artificial baby sitting in the baby stroller falls over because her stun belt went to vibrate and she, quote, got shot. And you say, not me, not me. I didn't do it in the debriefing. And we replay it and we show that you were incorrectly shooting just at anything that moved, and one of those shots errantly, shot this woman. You own it. That's the rest of your life in litigation or perhaps jail.
And so I'm almost reluctant to ask because I know plans have been on the horizon for a long time on the resort and various things out there. Is there a timeline for when this facility might come online and be available for students and instruction?
We currently think we'll have vacation villas, the condominiums, and the initial RV group up and operational in the next 24 months.
Okay.
We're grading for it right now. The grading will take about another 4 months. We're grading about 125 acres, make a big flat spot, putting in the infrastructure which comes next.
Is that in between where phase 3 is and where the main campus is?
It's to the west of phase 2.
Okay.
So if you go all the way down to the far side of phase 2, there's a 200-yard rifle range there, and if there's a Connex box there. If you stand at that Connex box and look toward the mountains to the west, those mountains, by the way, are in California, you will see in the foreground, about 500 yards, a big white area with where the natural terrain and all the plants have been removed, and that's the 125 acres.
Okay.
So we're currently thinking then, and we've finished the grading for the 2,000-person classroom and the new offices for our staff and the pro shop and armory and all of those. And we have a deal with a large multi-billion-dollar manufacturing company to put our above-ground components in. So it's finally coming together. It's taken us a long time, but understand that there's no, multi-billionaire in front sight.
Right.
It's supported by the members, and we keep growing it as fast as we can.
So I guess my question then would be, in the position of Chief Operating Officer, do you have a military background or a police background or a construction background or an operations background? How did you come to be where you're at with Front Sight?
The answer to that question in order is no, 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 and no.
Okay.
My background is I went to school in Southern California and got an undergraduate and a doctorate degree at USC.
Doctorate in what?
Dental surgery.
Awesome.
And then I went in the Air Force and spent a couple of years making teeth happy in the Air Force in the Philippines and came back here and practiced dentistry for a long time. And in 1996, I came out and took what I think was the second class at Frontsight and met Frontsight's owner, Dr. Piazza, and we became friends. And at that point, I'd sold my dental practices, and I'd gone into phase 2 of my life's career, which was to finance golf courses around the country. And I started a company with a partner of mine in Florida, and we'd financed irrigation systems, the big sprinkler systems that go in golf courses. So if you play golf well or poorly, you've seen all the big sprinklers. Well, they cost them millions of dollars, and they never figure out that they need the money set aside to replace it when it's time to replace them. So my business provided financing for a company named Rainbird, which is one of the major manufacturers of irrigation equipment for golf. And I was winding that down, and I told Dr. Piazza that I'd like to look, since my wife was retiring, at a third phase opportunity to see if we could grow Frontsight into the resort that we both envisioned. And in 2010, I moved out to Pahrump to accomplish that. And within the next couple of years, I told him it'd take us about 10 years, and we'll be pretty close to that.
Okay.
And so I used my experience in golf resorts to bring to the table, because really we're building a golf resort, but you just take out the golf course, put in the shooting facility. Everybody in their community has a country club somewhere close by, and if you look at them, they typically have housing adjacent or around them. Because of the nature of what we do, the housing doesn't surround the shooting facility. It's adjacent to it. But the idea is the same. It's no different than a tennis club or a golf club. But your listeners might also find interesting that this is one of one, meaning Frontsight will be the only firearms training resort in the United States. It's a stay-and-play facility. Most facilities are quite remote. Most shooting clubs, they're either in the small concrete tilt-up buildings in the local strip mall, the indoor range, but that's not analogous to Frontsight. The larger facilities that are well known perhaps to some of your listeners, like Gunsight or Thunder Ranch, have more remote locations. We decided we couldn't have a remote location and appeal to a large volume of people. Very few people come to Frontsight because of Pahrump. They may come in spite of Pahrump, but they do come because of Las Vegas. So, gee, honey, you want to go shooting? We can go to Las Vegas and go to a show before or after. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It softens the appeal. And most of the time when people come, they enjoy it sufficiently that they come back. And that's been your experience.
And it's really kind of been a scheduling thing for me. I had a convention that I went to last week or whatever, and then a little bit of break, and then I had to come back out. I'm like, I'll just stay out there and I'll take another class and get my concealed carry.
And that's a very typical format. We see Las Vegas has a massive convention business. For you pick the subset of bricklayers to rocket scientists, and they're coming to Las Vegas for some kind of convention. And as we come up with more and more things for them to do at Frontsight that are gun related, whether it's the laser thing that we're shooting. By the way, I neglected to mention that different in that laser scenario, the weapons you're shooting are real weapons. They're shooting real ammunition except for the projectile. So it's a blank that has a case, powder, and a primer. There's not even a barrel in the handguns or the rifles.
So it'll make noise, it'll eject a cartridge, and
it cycles, you can have malfunctions, it smells right, it sounds right,
Huh.
Everything feels right, as opposed to airsoft or simunitions, some of the products that are available now, which are sort of a artificial representation of what a real gun feels like in gunfire. So it will be a very safe environment. About the only thing you're going to be able to do wrong here is sprain your ankle as you're running around. But we can do that type of training as a giggles and grins event for the Las Vegas convention crowd, advertise it over there. During the day, some number of people will come over and do this just for fun. It's not serious training. But in the process, they'll see, I didn't even know this front sight place existed. Well, gee, we'll give them an offer to become a member at some discounted rate because they're there, and some number of them will take it, and we can make money on the day event. It's kind of like a e-ticket ride at Disneyland.
Sure.
And then in the evenings, people like yourself who've taken training and are more competent can use this same laser simulator as a way to ingrain additional tactical skills in the most realistic environment we can figure out how to create without getting you hurt.
Excellent. So I like to ask my guests some questions that are not really personal in nature, but give more insight into their personality. And
remember, I carry a gun all the time.
When we talked the other day, I asked you what year you graduated from high school, and I'm sure you're thinking, why is this guy asking me that? So I asked 3 different questions. So I'll give you 3 movies, and you tell me which one would be your go-to as opposed to the other 2. Dr. No, How the West Was Won, and Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia, of those 3, but Lawrence of Arabia wouldn't even be on my top 50 films. I was a cinema major and undergraduate at USC, and if you were going to ask me favorite film question, it'd have to be Godfather Part 2, and there's a number of other films, none of those, but David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia is a beautiful film.
Okay. In music, I'll give you 3 artists, and you tell me which one you'd pick over the other 2. Ray Charles, Elvis Presley, or Marty Robbins?
Tough call. I love Streets of Laredo, the Marty Robbins classic. I'm a rock and roll 60s fan, Elvis Presley. I got a chance to see Presley in Las Vegas here. Was one of the best shows I've ever seen.
And that's why I asked the question, because you get stories like that are so cool. Where'd you see him?
At the International Hotel. It was the Hilton then, I think, or maybe I've got it transposed. But
Westgate now, right?
Yeah, I think so. They change hands with numbers. What was the third one? Ray Charles. Right.
Ray Charles.
Yeah. What'd I say? Great song. So tough to choose. My answer is I'd pick them all for different reasons.
Okay. And then the final question, especially since you're from Southern California, which is probably the epicenter of car culture in the world. In high school, if you had a choice between these 3 cars, which one would you drive to school every day? A 62 Impala, a 62 Ford Galaxie 500 XL, or a 62 Plymouth Belvedere, and that could be a Max Wedge car if you wanted it to be.
None of those.
Well, it has to be one of those 3. But
doesn't
then you
have to be one of those.
You can tell me which one you choose over those.
I would have chosen a 57 Chevy Bel Air.
Uh-huh.
And right now in my garage, there's a 57 Chevy Bel Air.
Convertible or a hardtop? Or
Hardtop.
Hardtop?
Yeah, I went to the trouble of having got a 57 that's been full restomodded and got a brand new frame and drivetrain and suspension and a 502 crate motor.
Oh, wow.
All the good toys, and it's the car I wanted from high school.
It's two-tone?
Well, it's all red, but
Okay.
it has the side stripe with a panel on it that's metallic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a single color. It's a really brilliant car. Sounds right, looks right. It just got a Tremec 5-speed in it and puts out about 600 horsepower, and you can pass everything but a police officer.
And maybe a gas station.
Yeah, it's not exactly the friendliest thing on petrol.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking so much time to sit down and talk with me about Front Sight and all the great things you guys are doing out there.
I'm really glad that you did this, and I hope some of your listeners will decide to come on out and experience what you have. It's a great place. We're building a community of people who are like-minded, and they can do it as a family adventure and enjoy the fun of Las Vegas attached to it, and we're growing this business, and we appreciate your opportunity to add the word and get it out there.
No, I have 2 memberships for my son and daughter, and hope they'll be joining me in the next couple of years.
They'll have a great time when they come.
All right. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome, Jim. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Marq'd Men podcast with John Scott Lewinski and Jim McIlvaine. Be sure to give us a rating on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever else you might be finding us. And check out past episodes at marqdmen.com, MarqDmen.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon.